Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Around the Net, as it's time to J-Talk our way through the Toronto Blue Jays organization. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, voice of the Lansing Lugnuts, and you'll hear from Trey Wilson, and we'll talk some Lansing Lugnuts single-A baseball. Also, we'll move up the ladder at the Class A advanced level in the Florida State League. We'll speak with Tyler Murray or perhaps Al Hernandez about the champion DJs and how their performance has been. We'll also speak with AA New Hampshire and Tom Gauthier. But we begin this week up at the AAA level with Ben Wagner, the voice of the AAA Buffalo Bisons. Ben, how are you?
Doing wonderful, Jesse. Thanks for asking. Couldn't ask for much better weather, and hopefully the Bisons can get on a little bit of a roll after yesterday morning's win.
We begin this week with you. I know the Major League Baseball draft is going on. You go back 4 years ago, the 11th overall draft pick for the Jays was McGuire. And it took him a little bit of time to get up to the AAA level. And now that he's there, it has looked to me like he has been very sharp. How has he been?
Exactly that. And he's doing it in a couple of different ways, too. We saw the curveball in his debut used a little bit more, keeping an Indianapolis lineup off balance. Fastball establishing, of course, is going to be the number one thing for Deck to do. But his combination of fastballs and sliders yesterday proved to be the difference maker against the Toledo lineup. And for 3 different starts that he's made, taking every turn in the rotation and doing things just a little bit different. Yesterday he was working with Mike Nickius, for example. It had A.J. Jimenez behind the plate, somebody that had caught him as well just before the promotion. And essentially they both got promoted to Buffalo from AA at the same time. So it was an easy move for Gary Allenson to pencil them in together the first start. But with the early rise of 10:35 and making that first pitch for Deck, Mike Nickius went behind the plate, and their plan was to pound with fastballs, use wipeout slider, and the result and numbers speak for themselves. He was great. Got deep into the ball game, managed his pitch count, used 94 tosses, and fanned 10 at the end of his business yesterday.
Well, this is the fun of it. There are so many players that as they rise up to the organization, the lower levels, you get to see them as they're ironing things out, and then you get to see them at AAA, whether we look back to the past not too long ago. Marcus Stroman, very highly anticipated, making his debut at the AAA level and getting all set to make his appearance in the major leagues. And now here's McGuire's arrival. When you first received that player whom you've heard an awful lot about, what's the very first thing you want to ask them?
Well, I just smiled and I said, hey, it's great to finally see you, because over the last couple of seasons in spring training, Deck and I, we'd part ways and we'd talk, and, I worked the clubhouse like we all do, and we always part and say, all right, hey, hope to see you north in Buffalo sometime this year, or see you in a couple of weeks. Deck felt the same thing, and, 2012 didn't go as well as he wanted. 2013, he had a couple of bumps and bruises along the way. Then he really turned the corner, he said, yesterday or last year in August. And just yesterday when I was talking to him, he seems to always draw these assignments for early starts. But he said, I throw great during these games. And sure enough, he did yesterday once again. And he, just had a brilliant performance. So it's not like I have to ask him one specific thing. I get a good enough report from some of the guys that are coming back and forth from AA to AAA and vice versa. But, one thing that I wanted to find out from Deck is how has he turned this corner? And he said establishing the fastball has been great, but A.J. Jimenez says watch out for the curveball. That's been the difference maker for him this year in AA. And sure enough, we saw it on display. And during his AAA debut, he won that decision, and he deserved to win yesterday, and he did. And through 3 starts, he's got 2 wins under his belt after a very long wait from 2011, finally getting out of the Eastern League.
Well, you mentioned A.J. Jimenez moving right up the chain with Deck. Tell me about A.J.
A.J. has had a little bit slower of a start, I think, than what he wanted at the plate. And everybody's going to look and focus on the numbers. Now, historically, he has never been able to get into a good rhythm at the plate because of some injuries that have sidelined him. But once that comes around and he can get some frequent ABs, and Buffalo has a very long homestand right now that'll cap off on the weekend. There have been a ton of rovers here, and they've been making adjustments, doing a lot of early work with A.J. Anything he does with the bat is going to be a plus, and he's not going to slug 15 to 20 home runs a year. But what he wants to do is hit maybe 25 to 30 doubles every year. He's a line drive hitter. He's always a target. And one, because the Blue Jays have, and deservedly so, talked about him over the last couple of seasons as being a future piece behind the plate. I know in Buffalo, for example, we asked him to do the home run derby, and he wants no part of that because he's a line drive hitter. He never wants to get that uppercut working in a swing to mess up any of his mechanics as well. So he understands the type of hitter that he wants to be and the type of hitter he needs to be at the same time. Now, defensively is where he shines. Twice yesterday, absolute seeds to second base, getting a couple of the fastest men in the International League trying to swipe bags. Jose Constanza, for example, or Ezekiel Carrera, for example, he had 22 stolen bases and only been caught 5 times until Jimenez put one right on the corner of the bag and got him. And it was about as easy and as a fluid of footwork and throw that a catcher could ask for, and we saw it.
From current Buffalo Bisons, let's talk past Buffalo Bisons. More recently, Mike Hessman and Ali Carnegie of the past from back in 1945. I'm right now on the Bisons website, and I'm reading all about Ali Carnegie, who only stood 5'7", and yet his home run record stood there in the books in the International League for decade upon decade. And now the former Bison, Mike Hessman, is back in the town. Tell me this from your perspective.
Well, one, Mike Hessman is an ultimate human being that I got to appreciate even more so when he played with Buffalo in 2010. And in my first 3 years in the International League, you knew the caliber of player he was, one, because of what he was doing with the bat, but also just, the other guys in the league would talk about him when he was playing with Toledo. He was a free agent acquisition by the New York Mets and had a great start. And small little sample and a tease for Countdown to Bison's Baseball tonight at 6:35. Mike Hessman will be my guest since he's back in the lineup once again with Toledo after missing the first 2 games. And I asked him about that 2010 season, and he said that was the best start that he's had in his career. He had 18 home runs by the opening month of June. He was hitting for a high average. He was getting on base with great frequency, and then he was struck in the hand by a pitch in Norfolk. It broke 2 bones, and it put him on the shelf for 6 weeks. He said it was unbelievable. It was one of the really down moments of his entire career, and he felt real bad at the time that it happened because he never thought maybe he would regain that swing and that comfortable feel that he had in the batter's box during that time. He eventually got back into the Bison's lineup just before August, hit great, and the Mets called him up right after that. And it was the longest stint of major league service time that Mike has had. But he doesn't ever rest on that or say, oh, why me? Did I have to be roadblocked by Chipper Jones? And why did the Mets sign me? Because they've got David Wright playing at third base. He loves to play the game. He appreciates playing the game. He's a consummate gentleman as well. And he is right on the cusp of doing something that I hope honestly happens in Buffalo because of the connection. And he didn't put 2 and 2 together until he arrived in Buffalo just earlier this week and looked out at the wall and realized Ali Carnegie's name is one of 3 numbers that Buffalo has had retired since professional baseball came to this city in 1877. So I think it's starting to sink in a little bit more on the gravity of the accomplishment and the fact that his longevity and the fact that he's been able to stay healthy and be in and out of the lineup with his health and honestly with his ability too. I think it's all starting to come together, and maybe tonight's the night that it happens in Buffalo.
Well, I would recommend the reading of this article by Billy Dickinson for the Buffalo Bisons website, bisons.com, about Hessman chasing Carnegie. And for everyone who has the opportunity, listen into the pregame show, and Ben Wagner sits down with Mike Hessman. Well, from Buffalo and from home runs, I have to ask you about the Home Run Derby, which was held between our shows. How did that go, the annual event at Coca-Cola Field?
It's Bison versus Bison. There's only a little cash and clubhouse bragging rights on the line, but it was a fantastic display of long balls. Dan Johnson, for the second time in his career, lost a home run derby, and both of them have happened in this ballpark. Brett Carroll walks away with the crown, and to the treat of fans 1 week ago from tonight, they were treated to that annual home run derby. So Carroll holds the crown. He is the champion, and he has taken repeated ribbing for the accomplishment since then.
I'm joined by Ben Wagner, the voice of the AAA Buffalo Bisons. I see that Sean Nolan is back from injury and back starting tonight. On the other side of the coin, there was a game this past week where 3 different Buffalo Bisons pitchers departed due to different injuries. So perhaps someone walked underneath the ladder, whatever it might have been. Things have not been going very swimmingly for Buffalo at the very latest.
No, I was looking for black cats on the way to the ballpark last weekend. On that Sunday, I've never seen anything like it, where you've got 3 pitchers go down in a single game, and you can even roll in the 4th, because Sean Nolan, Sunday morning, had been out on the mound and been throwing a sim game, and with live batters in the batting cage, and Andy LaRoche hit a liner back off of Nolan. So that shut that down pretty early, and who knew that would be foreshadowing for what would be to come in the ball game. Ricky Romero had the start. He pulled up with a calf injury, officially not on the disabled list, but the Blue Jays have said, and so have people asking Gary Allenson about it as well in pre- and post-game conversations, that Ricky will be down for some time. Like it's going to be that way. Neil Wagner's on the disabled list, and John Stilson is still on the DL. But the good news for guys like Sean Nolan and John Stilson is that they're close, and they're almost 100% health. Specifically tonight, looking at Bison's left-hander and Sean, it'll be a limited start. They don't want to rush him back or overexert him in terms of making sure those legs are ready to be back underneath him. So it'll be an outing that's capped by a relatively low pitch count, but it'll get him back out there, and it's designed to do everything that you want him to do to get back on track in the next couple of turns in the rotation.
And finally, our question of the week for Ben Wagner with Buffalo. The question is simply, with the Major League Baseball draft going on right now, what is the degree of interest within the Buffalo Bisons clubhouse?
Well, I would say it's minimal. It's minimal interest. There's connections of guys that may get drafted and maybe have a connection to that player's hometown or where he grew up, or if it's a collegiate connection as well, guys will talk about that. So it's so many guys are so far removed from that draft day that it's not something that they can continually connect with unless you bring it up to them. Now, I will say, and you guys will get a kick out of this too, everybody will ask, well, what did you sign for, and how many zeros were on the end of your check when you were a bonus baby or what have you. So there's some jockeying back and forth about those topics. But in terms of degree of interest, is it on in the clubhouse? Not really, and guys aren't captivated by it. I think that's only indicative of the fact that so many guys are removed from that draft day, but it does conjure up plenty of good memories for them. When I asked about who made the call or who did they call afterwards, did you have a party, did you expect to be selected when you were? And Anthony Gose, who's in the big leagues, he wanted to go in the first round. He admitted it. He was thinking, he was planning in his mind he was going to be a first-round draft choice, and he was so deflated. Not deflated about the team that selected him, just deflated at the end of that first round that he wasn't a first-rounder, but he came very quickly soon after to the Philadelphia Phillies. And, he's shining under the brightest lights right now and having a great season in Toronto. So that's all hindsight, as they say, 2020.
Well, Ben, thank you very much for joining us again this week, and we'll check in with you next week. But until then, best of luck to the Bisons.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Enjoy it.
Hey, thank you. Let's go down the ladder now and join in with Bob Lipman with the AA New Hampshire Fisher Cats. Bob, how are you?
Doing well, Jesse. Good to talk with everybody once again.
Well, great to have you here. And, hey, look, how about the New Hampshire Fisher Cats putting together a nice winning streak?
Yeah, it worked out pretty well. May was, unfortunately, for the Fisher Cats, the losingest month in franchise history. So there's nothing like putting that very quickly into your rearview mirror. The Fisher Cats went on the road, had a 4-2 week on the road last week that finished up with a 3-game sweep of the Pirates, AA, the Altoona Curve. We won the first 2 games of our homestand with the Bowie Bay Sox, so a modest 5-game win streak came to an end last night, but clearly things starting to turn in the right direction, and I think everybody feels the positive nature of where this team now may be headed.
Oh, beautiful. Bowie Bay Sox, that was my local team. That was the team that I grew up rooting for. So I saw you were taking on Bowie, and I started to get a bit nostalgic. Speaking of what's going on with New Hampshire, so new arrivals, Melky Mesa and P.J. Walters, and it seems to me, just looking upon a box score here and there, that Melky Mesa has been a welcome addition.
Yeah, no question about it, and this is the other Melky who played came through the Yankees system, Melky Cabrera being the other. Of course, he's a Blue Jay now. We saw Melky Mesa with a very hard hitter. Leaves nothing in the batter's box, and he's played 7 games since Toronto acquired Mesa, and you mentioned the pitcher P.J. Walters from the Royals organization. They came over from AAA Omaha, and Mesa's been a good fit. Had a 2-home run game for the Fisher Cats last night and came up as the potential tying run in a 7-4 game with 2 on in the ninth, but didn't get that 3rd home run. That would have been something.
And P.J. Walters, a blast of a debut for P.J.
Yeah, and here's a guy who has pitched in the major leagues most recently with the Minnesota Twins, and he came out and just dominated Altuve in his first start last Saturday, a 7-inning, 1-hit, 10-strikeout outing. He was hit last night by the Bay Sox. They had 9 hits, but he only allowed 3 runs and certainly showed that composure that you would expect of a veteran pitcher. Didn't let things get to him too much. Left the ball game tied at 3-3, so he did his job. He gave the Fisher Cats a chance to win, and just wasn't our night last night.
And the question from Bluebird Banter set in with the win streak, more specifically, what was going right, and can they keep it up?
Well, I think that New Hampshire is definitely played better in every facet of the game. So the answer is, can you keep it up? You're not going to win 5 games in a row all the time, but I think that you look now at maybe what the potential is for the Fisher Cats for playing better defense. The bullpen guys are coming in, and they've looked terrific. But I think most importantly, the fact of not only putting Melky Mesa in our lineup, you have a one-time major leaguer now behind the plate with Hector Jimenez, who took over when A.J. Jimenez was promoted up to AAA Buffalo. Mike McDade, a veteran of the Blue Jays organization, is back as a regular in the lineup. And it's a pretty tough 1 through at least 7 or 8 in that New Hampshire order now that Bobby Meacham can rely on. And if you're starting to put runs on the board, that takes so much pressure off of your starting pitching. And so, yeah, this is definitely the looks of a different club moving forward.
Let me ask you about Andy Burns' inside-the-park home run, which would seem to me to be a relative rarity. Have you been used to seeing inside-the-parkers, or did this come out of nowhere?
This one was there was a contribution from the left fielder for the Bowie Bay Sox to this one. I'll explain it to you in a moment. We've had a few inside-the-park home runs that were Northeast Delta Dental home runs. We have a triangle out in right center, and the last 2 inside-the-parkers by Eric Thames and Kevin Pillar both hit off of that triangle and caromed away from the center fielder ball. Here it is rolling all the way over towards the left fielder, and so the speed of the guys, an inside-the-park home run. This one by Andy Burns that he hit in our ball game on Wednesday we have like an angled signboard, and it hit off the top of the signboard. The left fielder, Ronald Bermudez for Bowie, thought the ball was out and didn't realize that it was still in play. And so the ball hit off the signboard, bounced back into left field, and he just watched it. It just sat there, and so Burns made it all the way around. So a mental mistake, but they scored it an inside-the-park home run. The great part about it, it's one of the most exciting plays that you can have in baseball. This was a 3-run inside-the-park homer. Burns, the enthusiasm he showed as he crossed home plate was not like anything we've seen from Andy all year, and he struggled a little bit. So, from that standpoint, it was great to see.
Well, out came in the 5th game of that 5-game winning streak. He fell yesterday, but now trying to put it back together today. I'm wondering then, that brings this question to mind, who are the more enthusiastic players on the team on a normal basis?
All right, let's see. Let me scroll down here on my list. Jack Murphy. Jack Murphy's a pretty enthusiastic guy, and I know you've known him. He's a Princeton grad, and he'll give you the fist pump when our guys get get their outs. On the mound, I certainly have seen it from Scott Gracie. He's one that can show it. John Birdie also. I think he's been playing a lot better of late, and certainly is a guy who can make things happen with his speed, and he's fun to watch. So there are three of them.
Scott Gracie was the sole. Let's just say this: during Lansing Lugnuts road trips, it was Gracie's movies that the Lansing Lugnuts would depend upon. Outstanding movie collection, and you could always count on him to come through and entertain the team during a long trip. And Jack Murphy, I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to speak broadcasting with him, but he is fascinating to talk with on what makes a good broadcaster, what doesn't make a good broadcaster, what he thinks about and you talked about his Princeton education. Great sense of humor, and my gosh, is he fun to converse with.
Yeah, no question about that. And, you throw in some of the life experience he's had, and he's spent some time now in Australia, and certainly is a great addition to this Blue Jays club. And you know what? He may wind up behind the microphone at some point down the road. Who knows?
Bob Lipman with the AA New Hampshire Fisher Cats. Time for our question of the week, and that is simply because the Major League Draft is taking place right now, what degree of interest is that drawing within the Fisher Cats?
Yeah, I heard Ben's answer to that, and I'd say it's probably in our clubhouse maybe a little bit similar. These guys are a little bit closer to having been drafted than some of the other players. I'm not sure that any of us have a whole, breadth of knowledge of what's going on in the college game. Tom and I in the broadcast booth were just riveted to it last night, and so as soon as you hear those names of Hoffman and Pentecost, I happened to watch some of that Alabama and Kennesaw State battle in the college playoffs. So these names matter, I think, probably a little bit more to us. But I think the players are kind of aware, and I think they're certainly aware of how much money these guys are drawing now in the higher rounds. It is pretty staggering on what can happen. A baseball player's life can change really before they ever play a game in the pros.
Oh, yes. Well, Bob, thank you very much for joining us, and best of luck to the Fisher Cats, currently at home and hosting Erie.
Yeah, 3-game weekend set with Erie, Jesse, and get it all started here at 7 o'clock tonight, and then the team will head out on the road, and we'll see what we can do against the Tigers AA. Have a great week.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob. Advanced Florida State League, Al Hernandez with the Dunedin Blue Jays. Al, how does this find you today?
Oh, I'm doing well, Jesse. How are you?
Doing very well. Let's get right to the point. Let's get right to that question of the week. What degree of interest is the Major League Baseball draft drawing within the Dunedin Blue Jays?
No screwing around today, huh? I guess that's probably because us, much like you, are so close to some of these college players. Obviously, in the clubhouse, there's some interest being drawn from the draft. Everybody's keeping an eye on it, and I've heard some chit-chat about it. But there's so much going on the field right now that I think that's where most of these players' focuses are. We are only 3.5 games up on the Lakeland Flying Tigers with less than 10 games to go, and we're playing very stiff competition in the St. Lucie Mets. In the front office, though, I'll tell you that we are all buzzing about the draft and the selections, all wondering who's going to maybe make a debut here. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but it's not unheard of for a player to be drafted and reach advanced day by the end of the season.
Well, it's an interesting question and a very good place to put it into context. The fact that Dunedin is fighting for that playoff berth, and then once they make it into the postseason, the players who are getting drafted right now might very well be helping you out come August and September.
We did see that happen with the Daytona Cubs here in the Florida State League last year, especially with Chris Bryant. He was just drafted in June and ended up making a big contribution down the final stretch with the Daytona Cubs, who eventually swept us, the Dunedin Blue Jays, in the playoffs before going on to clinch their FSL championship. So it's a very real possibility that some of the guys that are being selected today, could end up making a key contribution in the playoffs if the Blue Jays are able to hold on to this playoff spot.
Well, let me ask you, this is one of those questions that fans ask as players start to excel, who is going to get promoted, who will leave the team shortly. Let me put an opposite spin on things. Who has been very good for Dunedin that you expect to still be around to contribute at the end of the season?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because so many people are always interested, who's the next guy up and coming, who are we going to lose? But I'll say Christian Lopes is a guy that I think will be around for a while. It's a crowded infield, so he hasn't really gotten his chance to fully shine yet. Obviously, we have Jorge Flores splitting time with him. Flores is now in Double-A New Hampshire, but now Peter Mooney is here. Kellen Sweeney, activated off the DL recently, is also vying for a spot in this crowded infield. But when Christian Lopes plays, he plays well. Yesterday, 3 for 4, a pair of doubles, and he just seems to be getting better every time we see him take that field. So I expect to see him here for an extended period. And I'll also throw in Mike Reeves. Derek Chung, the starting catcher, I think has been well documented how well he's played. This is his second year in the FSL, only his second year actually being a catcher, a converted infielder. He had a 15-game hit streak just snapped recently, and I think that's a name that may end up being promoted, and that would allow Mike Reeves to slide right into that starting spot, and I think he's ready to start now. He's just stuck behind Chung right now, but I think Mike Reeves, a guy that's from Peterborough, Ontario. He went to Florida Gulf Coast University here in Florida, so he's a guy familiar with the Canadian ties and with the Floridian ties, and I think he's just about ready. A left-handed hitting catcher, maybe focuses a little bit more on offense than defense, but he's definitely got a pretty good repertoire with these pitchers.
The mention of Derek Chung brings up the All-Stars on this DJ's team. Chung's an All-Star. Dalton Pompey, Eric Sikola, now promoted up to New Hampshire. Taylor Cole, Daniel Norris, Casey Hobson, Dwight Smith Jr., 7 All-Stars. Did any of them take you by surprise, or maybe did you expect even more players to be honored?
We didn't expect more. I think that the players on that team were almost all expected. Derek Chung, A, not only because of his great numbers, but B, because there's not much competition in the FSL North for catcher. He's by far the best catcher in our division. You could maybe say Casey Hobson takes you by a slight surprise. You look at his slash line, and those numbers are down a bit, but his power numbers are still there. He leads the league in RBIs. That's a big thing, especially in FSL North that is also shallow when it comes to first baseman. I'll say that maybe another surprise could be Dwight Smith Jr., and that's not because Dwight Smith Jr. doesn't deserve an all-star bid. He definitely does, looking at his numbers. But the thing is, there are so many worthy candidates in the outfield in our division that you'd think that maybe the voters would get sick of filling out all of the Blue Jays on the ballots and start putting in other players. But Dwight Smith Jr. definitely deserves the recognition. Probably the only guy I say that maybe got burned a little bit is Matt Boyd, just because if he had obviously stayed here longer and not been promoted to New Hampshire, he made 5 starts, was 4-0, led the league in wins, ERA, strikeouts, innings pitched, opponent's batting average, whip. He led the league in all of those categories before being promoted, and he was actually just sent back here recently and has made 1 start, 6 innings, 1 run. If he had been here for longer, rather stayed longer before being promoted or returned sooner, he definitely would have been an all-star, but I don't think that's something that will bother Matt too much.
Start for Matt in his return, immediately striking out 9 batters, regaining his form in the Florida State League. Did you or Tyler Murray have the opportunity to ask him what he took away from his Double-A experience?
Tyler's spoken to him more than I have. I just had a quick conversation actually with him for the first time today. We haven't had a great opportunity to talk to him yet, but I know he said when speaking to Tyler, this is all about the swings and misses. There's so many fewer swings and misses when it comes up to Double-A. I know that a big part of Matt's success was his curveball. He wasn't always locating it in the zone, but it had so much movement that he was getting a lot of batters to chase it out of the zone, even in hitters' counts. And I think that's the difference that he's taken away, is that in Double-A, on a 1-0 count or a 2-1 count, you can't throw a slider or a curveball in the dirt and expect the batter to chase. You're going to have to come in there with a better pitch.
Matt Boyd starts today. The Dunedin Blue Jays taking on the St. Lucie Mets, game time 6:30 p.m. Joined by Al Hernandez, the voice of Dunedin, along with the voice of the people, Tyler Murray. Matt Boyd 4-0, 0.49 ERA, and a perfect example of the sort of guy we were talking about. Drafted last year, immediately shoots right up the ladder and making an imprint upon your DJs. The DJs fighting it out for the playoff berth. Al, let me ask you, what's it going to take? How many wins do they need for them to clinch this playoff spot? What do we need to watch for, and what are the obstacles in their way?
Well, the Blue Jays do have one more series left with the Lakeland Flying Tigers, who are the team on their tail. So this is game number 61 tonight of 70 in the first half. The Blue Jays have a 3.5-game lead on this Lakeland team. And interestingly enough, the Blue Jays, the first-place team in the North, where the second-place team in the North, the Lakeland Flying Tigers, are playing the first-place team in the South, the Fort Myers Miracle. So all four of these teams are taking these games very seriously as they play each other. Following these series, though, the Blue Jays will take on Lakeland directly, one game in Lakeland, and then two here in Dunedin. So really, it's just about staying focused. The Blue Jays have the lead. They have the 3.5-game lead. All they have to do is worry about themselves. They don't need to be looking over their shoulders as long as they go out there and take care of their business. And I think that this team just has too many leaders when you look at the guys like Derek Chung, Casey Hobson, Marcus Connect, guys that have been here, that have been through this and know what it takes. And even the young guys, Dalton Pompey, Dwight Smith Jr., Daniel Norris, all three of those guys are very quiet, but you can tell that they command a presence and that people follow their lead by their actions on the field. And I think that this team just has too much talent and too many strong leadership potential to not clinch the division.
Let me finish up with a question sent in from Bluebird Banter, written by a minor leaguer. That was simply, with your 7 All-Stars, Al, how did you expect them to be entering this season?
Well, I'll tell you, I didn't expect 7 All-Stars, that's for sure. We all knew that the potential that Derek Chung and Casey Hobson had coming off of strong seasons last year. We expected repeat performances here. Dwight Smith Jr., obviously the former first-round pick. Yet we have Daniel Norris, who is a first-round pick. We have Dalton Pompey, who is a top 20 prospect. So we knew the potential all of these guys had, and especially I'll say Taylor Cole. Taylor Cole's the one wild card that we didn't expect coming into the season. He had an ERA in the 4s last year. He wasn't phenomenal. He was solid enough, and he came up here. He slotted in the number 2 spot in the rotation, so I think this staff knew what they were doing, and he's exceeded everybody's expectations, and I'll say that he is the one that nobody probably would have bet would have been an All-Star.
Al Hernandez with the Dunedin Blue Jays. You can find Al on Twitter. All you have to do, just look him up at AHERNA, Aherna 262. Al, thank you very much, and best of luck to the DJs in clinching that playoff berth.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, Jesse.
We're working our way down the ladder from Ben Wagner in AAA to Bob Lipman in AA to Al Hernandez in A Advanced. Now I'm joined by Trey Wilson, who joins me for Lansing Lugnuts games all season long. Trey, how does this find you today?
Going well. Ready for some Friday baseball. Couldn't ask for much better weather here in Lansing. Finish up this, or I guess roll halfway through this last homestand of the first half.
We begin with a question simply about the Lugnuts All-Stars, sent in from Bluebird Banter. 4 Lansing Lugnuts All-Stars, Matt Dean and Mitch Ney, first baseman and the third baseman to start the game, the reserve outfielder Derek Lovelace, and pitcher Griffin Murphy. Among those players, who did you perhaps not expect to be an All-Star entering the season?
Mitch Ney and Matt Dean, that's expected. I think, in fact, I think that they've both still maybe not quite met the expectations that they may have had coming into this year, but they'll be there. They'll be fine. They're both young. Griffin Murphy, I wouldn't say surprised. I would say the biggest surprise out of all of them is Derek Lovelace, but that's not even that surprising. Anybody that's seen him play over the last year knows that he has a ton of tools. And once he can piece it all together, he's going to be a very good hitter. And now the hitting's starting to come through. The defense has always been pretty good for him. You can put him in any of the 3 outfield spots. He has good speed. He has a strong arm. I guess he was the biggest surprise, but it still wasn't much of a surprise.
Well, 4 All-Stars for the Lansing Lugnuts named to the Midwest League All-Star Game. That was just announced. A player who has not been named an All-Star. However, my gosh, after a rough April, he has turned it on strong. And that is shortstop Dawel Lugo, who has the current team-high hitting streak. So what changed for Dawel?
Well, Lugo he's a little more patient up at the plate. He's still not working a lot of walks, but he's not trying to swing too much, not trying to do too much with his swing, using those good hands and driving the ball. He's not hitting it particularly hard, not hitting it particularly far. He's just knocking singles all over the place. Haven't seen a lot of extra base hits for him during this stretch, but he's hitting .410 those 15 games, 25 out of his last 61 heading into today, and he's just been consistently getting on base, and that's good to see for Lugo.
So Lugo's risen up the Lansing Lugnuts lineup. So is catcher Jorge Size, who's been batting 3rd or 4th in the order, and he's got the long on-base streak going at the moment. You had a chance to see him last year in Bluefield. Has he improved, or is this the same solid Size that you saw in 2013?
I think the bat's about as good as it was. I think, he had a good bat last year. I'd say that the bat's been about the same. The difference is his patience at the plate. He's worked 24 walks this year in 36 games, 112 at-bats in that stretch. And he's only struck out 21 times, so he's walked more than he's struck out. This after in 2013, he only walked 14 times the entire season over 51 games, and he struck out more than twice as much as he walked. So a lot more patience up at the plate. He has a mature presence when he steps into the box, and it's led to him getting on. He's now been on base for, 17 consecutive games. He didn't play last night, so the streak continues on. And during that stretch alone, he's worked 13 walks. So he's walking at a ridiculously good rate, and that's good to see. He's just been more selective. He's fought off 2-strike pitches, and he's found ways to get on base.
Let's talk second-round draft picks. It's the draft going on right now, and we'll speak more about that in depth. But the Lugnuts have a couple of second-rounders in their starting rotation. Say nothing about the second-round closer, the All-Star Griffin Murphy. Chase DeYoung and Jeremy Gaborisky are players who, they brought headlines. They've certainly garnered attention. So how are each of them looking so far?
Well, let's start first with Chase. If you look at the numbers and you're just looking at box scores, you probably have some reason for concern. But us having seen him the last few starts, the start of Dayton 2 starts ago, we'll throw that one out. That was a tough game for him, and he didn't look right from the start. But other than that, he's looked fine. He's been up a little bit with the fastball, but the curveball still, mostly he's been able to put it where he wants it. Changeup we're seeing get mixed in a little bit here and there, but he's just fallen victim to bad luck in some of these outings, including last night. He gave up 5 total runs, and only one of them were earned. There was an inning that should have probably ended, and he ended up having the inning continue on after an error. And it looked like he was going to have a 1-2-3 frame. Instead, the inning rolled through, and he put another runner on base and then gave up a 3-run homer. And he's got to learn how to pitch around those types of situations. But it's just been a tough draw for Chase, really, since the beginning of the season. He's getting less run support than anybody on this team. He's not getting a lot of defensive help behind him for whatever that reason is. It's obviously just a coincidental thing. But he's had some tough outings in the past few weeks. But you talk about Jeremy Gaborisky. He's now worked 12 starts this year, and we saw him work a season, or I should say a career high with 9 strikeouts a couple of nights ago. Gaborisky still, the fastball the fastball velocity, I should say, is rising a bit of late, starting to get up to where we're seeing him around 90 miles per hour again, which is good to see. He had started out the year 83, maybe, on a good day, 83 to 85. So the fastball velocity is starting to climb back up, and he throws strikes, and that's what the that's what the Lugnuts have needed from pitchers this year. Gaborisky has been able to come in and throw strikes, and that's not something that we've seen very many guys be able to do.
Well, we're speaking with Trey Wilson, Trey is one of the broadcasters with the Lansing Lugnuts, joining me now on Around the Nest. And so from those Toronto Blue Jays recent draftees into the draft itself, Trey, our question of the week is simply, for the Lansing Lugnuts, the players, the coaches, what is the degree of interest that they're taking in the ongoing Major League Baseball draft?
Well, I think that you and I are keeping a pretty close eye because we're looking to see if any college pitchers get picked up. This is a team right now that needs some help in the rotation. There have been a lot of injuries. Brad Allen's gone down. Tom Robson has gone down. We've seen a few other guys out of the rotation that have seen troubles with injuries, so we need some depth at pitcher, at least at this level. And you look at the high school arms at Toronto draft, obviously they're going to be starting out at the lower levels, maybe in the GCL this year. And then Jeff Hoffman gets picked with Toronto's first pick. He's not going to pitch this year. So I guess up to the second now, to people that are listening live, still waiting to see if some arms get picked. I haven't seen the 8th round pick yet because I've been on the phone, obviously, but looking to see some college arms that can start at this single A level, can come in and, for our sake, have somebody that can come in and throw strikes and eat up some innings, because we have the young arms here like Chase DeYoung and Alberto Chirado that just can't go as deep into games quite yet. They're not as young and they haven't built up that durability.
Well, I've got you. Are you ready for the 8th round draft pick for the Blue Jays?
I just pulled it up while I was talking. I see that we have the college arm that was picked up.
I thought you might. That's right, the Florida Gators. So you know that Lugnuts manager John Tamargo Jr. is happy about that.
Well, we'll see if Schaefer ends up here, or if he even ends up signing. The draft is always so, you never know. You never know, and we never know where these guys are going to end up. But should he sign, this could certainly be a level where you see Justin Schaefer coming in, especially since we as a club right now need some help in the rotation. I think that we could probably see Tirado and Shane Dawson back into a piggyback combination at some point, and maybe even Chase DeYoung. I think they want Chase DeYoung to start to stretch it out a little bit more and go a little bit deeper into games. But if we could get some of the younger arms tandem back up, make room for another college arm to come into this rotation.
Alberto Toronto starts tonight, 7:05 p.m. You can hear Trey Wilson and myself on the call. And the Lugnuts are home all weekend long through Monday. Tonight they finish things off against the Arizona Diamondback-affiliated South Bend Silverhawks. And then tomorrow the Great Lakes Loons, affiliated with the L.A. Dodgers, arrive in town to start up a 3-game series. Matt Dermody, Shane Dawson, and Jeremy Gaboriski will be the starting pitchers in those games. Trey Wilson, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jesse. See you in a bit.
All right. Well, we're wrapping things up in terms of answering your questions, talking with the different broadcasters throughout the system. I see that this question was sent in via Bluebird Banters, Sweet Bee Nation this year. How is the half-season end decided? The question goes, E and N for E. Is it when each team has played half their schedule or on a specific date? Well, the answer is that the schedule is purposefully scheduled into half seasons, and that is for the Lansing Lugnuts, the Lugnuts in the Midwest League. That is also for the Dunedin Blue Jays in the Florida State League. That is not for every league on the way up. The Eastern League goes the entire way through. I believe the Southern League, though, and I need to do my research, and perhaps the Texas League as well, it depends upon the league itself whether they want to do the half system. Now, the positives about the half system are you get to sell your playoff tickets early. You get to punch your playoff ticket, and then the sales staff gets to sell those tickets. The negatives are the team. If you make the playoffs from the first half of the year, it's not quite the same team that you got when you actually begin playing the postseason several months down the road. But, for example, in the Midwest League, 140 games in a season, so 70 games in each half. And then in between is the All-Star break. So for the Midwest League, the All-Star game will be played on Tuesday, June 17th in West Michigan at the Whitecaps home ballpark, which suffered through a fire in the off-season, but now they've fixed it up and it looks great. And so those 70 games, you get rained out. You cannot make up the game from the first half in the second half. The one-loss records are wiped clean. And so if a game is canceled, it is canceled, and then you only play 68, 69 games in the first half. Lugnuts had a game canceled because of snow up in Wisconsin, Milwaukee Brewers affiliate, earlier on in this first half. But 70 games in each half for the Lugnuts, and the top 2 teams in each division make the playoffs. At the end of the season, the number 1 team from the second half faces the number 2 team from the first half, and vice versa. And there are 3 different rounds in the playoffs to determine a league champion. So that is the way that the half season is determined, and it goes halfway through. The end of the half season is the All-Star break, and it's exactly midway in the year. And that is why, for the Lugnuts in the Midwest League Class Single A, and the Dunedin Blue Jays Class A Advanced in the Florida State League, that is why their All-Star breaks are in June and not July, because the half-season mark for the minors, when you start up in April and you end in early September, you end in June. The Major League schedule goes on several weeks more, all the way to the end of September, with the postseason beginning in October. Well, we love to play for you a conversation each week on Around the Nest, and this week you're going to hear from Chase DeYoung, the Lugnuts' right-handed starting pitcher. And included in this upcoming conversation, you'll hear about his own draft day experience and plus some advice that he has for some upcoming draft prospects. So Chase DeYoung of the Lansing Lugnuts, I had a chance to catch up with him not all that long ago.
This is Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, joined by Lansing Lugnuts pitcher Chase DeYoung. Chase, beyond pitching, what other positions did you play?
Well, back in high school, I played right field, and so pretty much outfielder other than pitching. So.
When did you start full-time pitching, committing to it?
Well, I played both sides of the field, offense and defense my whole career up until I got drafted. So pretty much just until I signed professionally, then I just strictly pitching.
What were your strengths as, say, a hitter?
Well, I hit left-handed, so just the big left-handed bat. I wasn't really fast, but I could run a little bit, and I got a big arm, so playing right field, I was able to throw out a lot of guys.
So closing years of high school, University of Southern California, you commit. I bet there were tons of other college teams that wanted you to go there. Meanwhile, major league teams are scouting you. What is that like?
My whole senior year was stressful, but it's really a blessing because not a whole lot of guys get to do what I had to do through the whole draft process and recruiting process of collegiate baseball and professional baseball, where my freshman until my junior year was very heavily based on, or just heavily recruitment by collegiate programs, and then once I actually did commit to a school and then became of age where professional scouts wanted to talk to me, where it was the 2012 draft class, then it was like, okay, well, now I committed to SC. All right, now I got to see the other half of this. So it was very fun, to be honest. I'd wake up, I'd go to school, I'd come home, I'd go to the gym, then I'd come back, and then I'd have a scout from the Toronto Blue Jays sitting there waiting for me, and then I'd talk with that scout, do the home visit, and all those things, and then I would be done with the meetings around 9 o'clock at night, and then I'd be able to start my homework because I still at the time was a student. So, it was busy, but how many other kids in the country can actually say that they had that? So,
did major league teams simply want to find out what you were like as a person?
Yeah, the whole purpose of a home visit is to do your homework on the guy. Obviously, you can see what he does on the field, but to see what the person's like off the field, what kind of home environment he comes from. I commend the Blue Jays on it because they actually do a really good job. My area scout Joe Aversa did a phenomenal job with his home visits. That he came back twice and very thorough, just very welcoming. It kind of puts a face with the organization where it's not such a big kind of just scary organization that it's, hey, you know what, Joe with the Blue Jays, he was in my house, we were talking, I really liked him, I want to communicate with these guys the best I can, things like that. It does a really good thing on the other half where, we're a high school kid sitting there talking about professional baseball that we've been dreaming about since we were a little kid, and just having that professional scout sitting in your room saying, you know what, Chase, you are good enough, and I think you got a shot, and this is where, we would like to take you, or this is where, we think you would fit in, and things like that. And, the whole scouting process is really, it's surreal. And if I had to give advice to anybody coming up on the upcoming draft, just enjoy the process, because, for some guys it happens once, like me, where you just come out of high school, or for some guys it happens a lot, but it's fun. Take it for what it is. You have professional organizations thinking you're good enough to play for them, so enjoy it.
Speaking with Chase DeYoung of the Lansing Lugnuts, where were you on draft day?
Well, the first day, because in 2012, that draft, it was just the first round and the supplemental round, where I was being considered for a few spots on the first day. Kind of hoped that I would go maybe towards the end of the first or anywhere in the supplemental. It didn't happen, so I was sitting in my house watching the TV, just taking it all in. It didn't happen on the first day, so then I just kind of regrouped, talked to my family, talked with my advisor or agent, whatever you want to call him, and then the next morning we woke up, kind of talked about it, prayed about it, and just said, you know what, we just got to submit to God's authority, and if this is what's planned, this is what's planned. And then talking with my agent, talking about a couple teams, and then all of a sudden we're sitting around the breakfast table and we're watching the computer, because it was televised over the computer. All of a sudden it says, now on the clock, Toronto Blue Jays, and then a couple minutes later it says number, whatever serial number they had on me, and it said right-handed pitcher Chase DeYoung, and I'm like, holy cow, it happened. For the last 9 months, scouts have been coming to my house telling me it's going to happen, and then it did, and it was just, everything clicked. And first thing I did, obviously, was hug everybody there, but my dad, he's a physician, and he had to go to the hospital, or he had to go to his office. This is about 2 miles up the road, so as soon as it happened, we kind of all grouped together, and I drove over, and I went and saw my dad, and I was like, Dad, I got drafted, and it was just a very sentimental moment, something I'm never going to forget, just an awesome time to just be with family.
Something that you have that a lot of people don't. Speaking of family, your cousin Jordan had already pitched in the organization and made his way all the way up to the major leagues. Did you talk with him, and what advice did he give you?
Yeah, Jordan did. He got drafted by the Blue Jays out of Cal State Fullerton, and then just worked his way all the way up the system and had a cup of coffee in the big leagues. He pitched out of the bullpen up there. Jordan was always there for me whenever I had questions, whenever I needed answers about anything about the pro ball aspect, because, you can try to prepare yourself as best you can for this environment, but if you can talk to somebody that actually went through it and lived it, it's a great resource to have, and Jordan's always been there for me for that. So it's great, and, just to be able to be in an organization that he pitched in, not a lot of people have that. So just to be able to come down and have DeYoung on my back, and have some of the veteran players or some of the big leaguers that played with him, like Sergio Santos, Ricky Romero, Dustin McGowan, guys like that, Eric Kratz, come up to me and say, hey, are you Jordy's cousin? Or are you related to Jordy? And I'm like, yeah, and just to see the good legacy that he left behind is something that I'm really excited to be able to carry on. How do you spend your off season? Being on the road from, spring training starts in February. You're here until pretty much September with instructional league or whatever they have afterwards for you. You're on the road a lot, and for the most part of the off season, I usually just spend it at home with family and friends, just kind of catching up. I am an avid outdoorsman. I like fishing, I like hunting, so my dad and I will take a couple trips and go go have a guy's weekend or something like that, where we go up and fish and golf and hunt and do things like that. So I really enjoy that. Being from Long Beach, California, the beach is always nice. It's not too cold when you get back there that you can still go and hang out and be at the beach. Come January, you're not really doing that, but so there's no shortage of things to do in Southern California, that's for sure. Let's go back earlier. You represent Long Beach very well. When you were 14, you played for the Pony League All-Stars. You won the championship. The very next year, the RBI Baseball Championship. Let's talk first about that Pony League title for you. What do you remember of that experience? That was one of the most memorable summers I'll ever have on a baseball field. We just had a little rec ball team right up the street from my house. I used to walk to practice. It's Whaley Park in Long Beach, and we just had the little rec ball all-star team that we knew we were good, and we've always grown up together like that and just playing all-star ball ever since we were kids. But that summer when we were 14 was pretty magical. We won our city, then we won our state, and then we went on and we won the Western Regionals or whatever, and then we went to Washington, Pennsylvania, representing the Western United States, and I mean it was amazing. We didn't lose a game all summer, and it was unbelievable. I mean, and those guys, I mean, I'd say 4 or 5 of those guys are my best friends. Like, we still hang out every time I come home and do things like that, and it was just an amazing experience just to be able to have that kind of representation of our city. Where I mean, the year before that, the team that went were runners up to Puerto Rico, and then a few years after that, there was another team that went, and I think they got maybe 3rd or 4th place. And then there was a team that went in 2011, I think, the summer 2011 and summer 2012. They won, and they won it. So, I mean, it's this little rec ball city park, and we're producing all these championships, or, I mean, being represented on a national stage where we play Puerto Rico, and my year we beat Taiwan, or Chinese Taipei. I mean, it's awesome to just see these guys that we literally all live within maybe a 10, 12-mile radius, and we're playing against all these other countries. It was so cool. And, we had 14 guys on that team, and by the end of high school, 12 of us ended up attending the same high school. 12 of us went to Long Beach Wilson. At the beginning, it was 3 of us. It was me, Avery Flores, and Thomas Walker that all didn't. And then after my sophomore year, I transferred in, but we were all playing in the Moore League, which is right there in Long Beach, and it was amazing. I mean, it was so cool because guys would come to the game and be like, "Man, I watched you when you were in Pony League." That was an amazing summer.
How did it feel? You were on TV. What kind of reception did you get when you returned?
First time I ever played on like the big screen or been on TV and stuff like that, and thank God I pitched well, and we actually won on a walk-off home run, so a lot of people, I mean, were watching back home, and it was just amazing. You come back, and you are like your little celebrities. It was pretty funny. The one thing I remember is that, I remember a lot, but it was an Olympic year when we were there. I think it was 2008, and I remember, because actually right up the street from me, I trained with them this offseason, but Misty May Trainer, the volleyball player, and Matt Trainer, the catcher, I trained with them this off-season. But back to 2008, Misty was off in Beijing playing, and it was funny because the Long Beach Press-Telegram covered like the Olympics, and then so you have like Misty's picture, Michael Phelps's picture, and then like right in the bottom corner there's like me and like the rest of the team, and I'm like, man, look at that, I'm on the front page of the newspaper with all these people. It's awesome. So it was like the first little taste of stardom, if you will, that you come back and people read about you, or people saw you on TV. It's like, man, that's pretty awesome.
And then you follow that up.
We can end things right there because we're running out of time. That's Chase DeYoung, pitcher for the Lansing Lugnuts. This wraps up another episode of Around the Nest, and we thank you very much for listening in. My thanks as well to Chase DeYoung, as well to Ben Wagner in Buffalo, Bob Lipman in New Hampshire, Al Hernandez in Dunedin, and Trey Wilson in Lansing. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, and we are here with you every Friday. You can catch all about the show. And visit our friends at Bluebird Banter, most definitely. You can submit your questions. We'll do our best to answer them week after now, though. And for this episode, we wish you well and enjoy the baseball this weekend.